There's something inside all of us that longs to fall in love. And we also desire to be able to grow old together with that person that we love. Unfortunately though, more than 50% of us, statistically speaking, will never get the opportunity to see that dream become a reality. By the end of this video, this session 1 of how to stay in love, I want to give you one big idea that can help reverse the trend and to help you not become a statistic. As a bonus, I'm going to give you a practical challenge that you can do this week to begin to apply this truth. So, before we get to all of that though, we need to identify what's the big problem that causes so many people not to experience long-lasting love. You want to know what that is? Come with me, let's take a look. When it comes to love, for this particular series of talks, I'm talking about romantic love. But everything we're going to talk about is relevant for all relationships. So whether you're single or married, divorced, or maybe thinking about getting remarried, or perhaps you're not even interested in ever getting married, all of the things we'll talk about in this series are helpful for all types of relationships. So lean in as we take a look at how to actually stay in love. Now, back to love. When it comes to love, I actually think we'd all agree it's easier to fall in love than it is to stay in love. Now more than ever, I think that that's true. It's easier for us to fall in love than to stay in love. Why is that? Well, I believe it's easier to fall in love more so than any time in human history because there are more opportunities to find love than there ever have been before. Just in the country of Australia where I live, there are now over 300 online dating services for people to be able to find each other. You used to be able to find love because of somebody living geographically close to you or connected to you relationally somehow, but now literally the entire world is your fishing pond. Over $120 million a year is spent in Australia alone on online dating services. So it is easier than ever before to find somebody to fall in love with. And yet I think it's harder than ever before for us to actually stay in love. Why is that so? Why is it so difficult for us to stay in love when it's easier than ever to fall in love? I think there's a reason for it, and I think there's a solution to our problem, and I want to invite you to take a look at the solution with me right now. Ideally, when it comes to staying in love and not just falling in love and how to do that well, you would look around at other couples that have been successful at that. Unfortunately, as we've already identified, more than 50% of people never fulfill the dream of having lifelong love. So it's hard for us to imitate or to mimic other people that have done it successfully. Even those that have stayed together for lifelong love oftentimes have stayed together, but they haven't stayed in love. You probably know stories, as I do, of people that have stayed in the same house their entire lives, but they didn't stay in love. So today, I want us to go back in time, and in fact, throughout this entire series, we're going to take a look at some ancient Jewish scriptures and some ancient Christian scriptures in what's referred to as the Bible in order to find a solution for how not just to fall in love, but how do you stay in love for the long term. Now, if you're not Jewish in background or you wouldn't call yourself a Christian or a follower of Jesus, no problem. You don't have to be Christian or Jewish to be able to get the truth and the wisdom out of these ancient scriptures. Everybody can apply this wisdom and truth to relationships and see themselves not just fall in love, but stay in love for the long term. Today, I want us to focus in on a famous passage of scripture, a famous saying of Jesus from the first century that I think really is the foundation of long-lasting love. Even if you're not a follower of Jesus, even if you've never been to church before, or perhaps never even read the Bible before, you've probably heard this famous saying of Jesus. Now, if you're not familiar with who Jesus is, Jesus was a first century Jewish carpenter who grew up around Jerusalem and around Israel. He claimed to be the Son of God, the Messiah, which the religious Jewish leaders of the day actually accused him with those statements of being blasphemous. That led to his crucifixion, a brutal Roman punishment where he was killed, but yet 3 days later, he rose again from the dead. It's the thing that Christians celebrate at Easter time, his resurrection, proving that he really was the Messiah, the Son of God. Jesus, one of his most famous statements, shares with us, I believe, the foundation for long-lasting love. Let's take a look at it. So, this truth that Jesus shared in one of his most famous statements is incredibly simple, and it's probably very familiar to you. But don't let the simplicity and its familiarity cause you to miss the deeper meaning that's in this statement. His best friend John wrote a biography of Jesus' life, and in this particular biography, he records these words that Jesus told his disciples. He said this, in John chapter 13, it starts with this. It says, "A new command I give you, love one another." Now, to give you some context, Jesus wasn't talking about a new command that had never existed before, but it was more like a kind of like a new element or a new country that's been discovered. So even think of like a country that had never been known before. Although it had never been known, it doesn't mean it didn't exist. The same is true with this command. You may be familiar with the 10 Commandments or even the 600 plus commandments that the Jewish people had to follow in order to please God. Jesus is actually identifying not necessarily a commandment that didn't exist, but a new commandment, meaning something that was brand new, that had just been discovered, that he wanted his followers to understand. And the simplicity of this commandment is something that oftentimes we can overlook and not see the depth of meaning. He says, here's the new commandment. I want you to love one another. The problem with the word love here is that Jesus was referring to the word love as a verb, not a noun. Oftentimes when I talk to people about the difficulties that they're having in relationships, they'll say to me, well, I just don't love that person anymore. What they're referring to is love as a noun or a feeling. What Jesus was talking about is love as a verb, as an action. It would almost have been easier for us to understand if Jesus had said, a new command I want to give you, serve one another. You don't say, well, I just really serve that person. You say, no, I serve them because I put it into action. That's what Jesus is talking about when it comes to loving each other. He says, put your love into action. I like to say it this way when it comes to especially marriage relationships, that when you put your love into action, it will actually grow your attraction. So if you're struggling with the feelings of love and maybe not being attracted to that person as much as you once used to, when you put love into action, it will actually grow your attraction. For the guys watching this video, I want you to lean in just for a second. Maybe don't tell your wife about this. We can kind of cut this part out later on, but I oftentimes think of it this way when it comes to a marriage relationship, especially for the guys. When you put love into action, you'll actually get more action. That's right. When you put love into action, you will actually get more action. Now, before we get ourselves into any more trouble in this idea of love being a verb and putting it into action, let's read the example that Jesus gave with this commandment of how to put love into action. Although we may not be able to see it in the example of people around us, Jesus gave us an example for us to follow. He said these words, "A new command I give you, love one another." And here's the example. "As I have loved you, so you must love," verb action, "one another." When we look at the life of Jesus and how he loved us, it gives us the example of sacrifice when it comes to loving other people. See, Jesus, when it comes to loving us, he put you and he put me before himself. He had this you first mentality when it came to loving us. And when he says to love one another as I have loved you, he wants us to follow his example by putting others first. So, what does that look like? What does that you first mentality look like in a relationship that's romantic or even a non-romantic relationship? How do I put into practice this you first mentality? Let's take a look at how we can do this together. I want to give you a challenge that you can take and put this truth into practice this week. This particular challenge I'm calling the You First Challenge. Here's how it works. I want you to pick that one person that you want to have a lasting, long, loving relationship with. Maybe if you're single, it's a friend of yours or someone you work with, or if you're married, I certainly hope it's your spouse, but I want you to pick one person. Then each day this week, I want you to keep a tally of how many times you invited them to go first, because it's the You First Challenge, in any area of your life. Maybe it's walking through a doorway, or perhaps it's making a cup of coffee or a meal for them, or even ordering at a restaurant. Just say, you first. Keep a tally of it each day. And then at the end of the day, I want you to calculate how many times you were able to let them, or you were able to say, you first throughout the day. Remember, this is a challenge for you. It's only a competition for you. It's not to be compared with that person or anybody else, but you're trying to beat your best score every single day. So on the first day, total your tally. On the second day, see if you can create a personal best, a PB, so to speak, for the You First Challenge each and every day throughout the week. Over the course of 5 or 6 or even 7 days, the You First Challenge, I believe, will revolutionize your relationship with that person. The You First Challenge will help you to make love a verb and not just a noun or a feeling. And remember the bottom line. The bottom line is this, that when you put love into action, it will actually grow your attraction. If you want to be more attracted to that person and have that feeling of love for that person, it requires putting love into action. Because when you put love into action, it will actually grow your attraction. Now, before we wrap up the whole thing and I let you out of the house, I've got one more thing I need to remind you about. Don't forget, remember where we started. This session, we said we all desire to have a loving relationship with someone for our entire lives. We long for that. And we've learned this incredible truth that if you want your attraction to grow, then you must let your love in action show. Make sure that you put love into action so that you can see your attraction grow. Whether you're a follower of Jesus or not makes no difference. Whether you believe the whole Bible or you're not sure about the Bible, you can put this truth into practice this week. And I want to encourage you with the You First Challenge this week. Imagine at the end of this week, after doing the challenge each and every day, your attraction growing because you put love into action. I can't wait to see you for our next session.